China's fast-changing media landscape. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Boo in Shanghai. China recently made it harder for advertisers to buy their favorite time blocks on Chinese TV channels like CCTV. China's media regulator has ended commercial breaks during dramas, for instance, and limited the number of entertainment shows stations can air. This week on Thoughtful China, we'll look at the impact of those changes on media plans and ad budgets. Plus, our own PD Black will share a historic perspective about how China's leaders look at media. But first with us is Seth Grossman, Managing Director of Carrot China. Seth, you've examined the new regulations, so tell us, what do you see happening in China nowadays?
Well, one of the constants that we've worked with for the last few years and that we continue to work with this year is the specter of media inflation. And certainly in 2012, we have that continuing and ongoing and exacerbated by the regulations that we've seen. What we've seen is that the inflation across the markets varies by channel and by geography. And that's something that we're working very closely with our clients to understand based upon their product distribution, how that affects their overall media plans. But the fact of life is that whether it's digital, whether it's television, whether it's out of home in the best locations, we're seeing media inflation, and that's something that advertisers and their budgets are having to deal with.
Can you elaborate a little bit? You mentioned that it varies from place to place.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're seeing media inflation in TV that can range from 15% year on year up to 80% year on year. And it really depends on what time slot we're talking about, the ratings that are behind that type of programming, and the overall inventory available for that time slot. Certain key satellite channels, Hunan Satellite or Zhejiang Huishi, all have seen very, very strong inflation in the past year, and that's largely because they've been generating strong ratings for some of the programming. Of course, the changes limiting the amount of advertising that can be inside of drama programs is also creating heavy demand for a limited amount of spots.
You mentioned now CCTV and Hunan satellite TV station. Well, these regulations actually come in at a time when most of your clients perhaps have already determined their budgets for the year 2012. Right. And these TV stations like CCTV or Hunan Weishi have already done their annual auctions for the best time slots and the packages and so on. What do you think is the outcome?
Well, there's two separate things that you're referring to. I think first of all is the issue of the different auctions and the fact that the changes in the regulations happened after the auction. In certain situations like Hunan Weishi, they actually repeated the auction.
Right, they redid it.
They redid it, yeah. And ultimately there was still strong demand for the remaining inventory going on, and simply because as advertisers are expanding their distribution across China, as they're looking to Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5 markets, they're looking for the footprint that national channels like CCTV or like Hunan or Zhejiang, Anhui, all can deliver. They can deliver the national audience. And ultimately, if they can deliver the national audience, then clients are going to seek out these programs. So what ultimately happened with those types of programs is the demand remained the same, and overall there still was strong inflation and strong demand for those inventory. Now, in terms of what does it mean for clients' budgets, I think that's been a very mixed story. Most clients' budgeting scenario goes in August, September is when they're putting in their budgets to global headquarters if they're an MNC. Right. And then somewhere in September, October, global confirms what their budget for the year is going to be, and then we go into auctions. For those that happen afterwards, some clients have gone back to headquarters and said, look, China's too important, we need more budget. And we're actually seeing clients coming back in with more budget.
So they went back to the headquarters and asked for more money.
That's right, for some clients. For some clients, it's necessitated some compromises in the number of markets that they can actually advertise in. So maybe they were expanding to 30 cities, now they're only expanding to 27 cities. For other clients, it's really been about changing the media mix. And that's where we've seen a rise in online video, and overall digital usage and digital share of the media budget rising. Not only because the demand from consumers continues to increase, but also because cost effectiveness and cost per thousand reach can often be delivered more effectively in an online environment.
What do you think will happen to the advertising rates on CCTV? Do you think it will increase dramatically this year compared to 2011?
Well, there's still strong inflation, year-on-year pricing increases for CCTV. Again, it varies by program and by time slot, but anywhere from 15 to 30% price increases on CCTV our standard.
There have been a lot of media pinches on hold in China for the past 3 months. Why is that? Is that related to the SARFT regulations or the high media inflation rates?
Certainly that plays an important part in it. There's no doubt that the high inflation is playing an important part in media pitching. I think though the overall overriding factor in this is simply that China has become so important to most MNCs' global profitability, is that they're absolutely looking to make sure that they have the best partners, whether that's on the media side, on the digital side, or on the creative side. I think you've been seeing an overall increase in all pitches, not just in the media side of the business.
Thanks, Seth. Now we'll hear from PD Black with a thought or two about how history has imperial traditions in handling media in China.
The secret to making sense of China's media's world is to stop viewing it like a business. Think like a Chinese leader, for whom media is government's partner in building a long-term, healthy nation. It's like a hospital. The Chinese government is the administration. They handle everything from infrastructure to planning. Media are the doctors, who deal with the actual patients themselves, in this case, society. In a good hospital, doctors and administrators work together for the patient. Of course, there are secondary agendas, Ferraris, promotions, but the patient has to come first. Getting rich by harming the patient is a strict no-no. To protect against this kind of abuse, hospitals have lots of ways to select, monitor, and control doctors. Some of the rules are explicit, but some of them are unspoken. These are like the judgment calls that Chinese media has to make every day on content. Another thing, in a hospital, there's a blurred line between doctors and administrators, especially at the senior level. Same here. Chinese government doesn't control the media. It is the media, in some form or another. So what about foreigners, foreign media? Those are like docs from other hospitals who want to set up high-tech, high-profit practices. What does a hospital do? A wise hospital would watch them closely, profit handsomely, and keep them away from core functions. Two last comments. This whole metaphor requires viewing society like a patient, dependent, at risk, but fixable with the help of a couple of experts. Now, many overseas would look at this quite differently. Finally, you may wonder, where do advertisers fall into this picture? Well, they're like the pharma companies. You can't have a hospital without medicine, but you sure don't let them run the place.
Well, thanks, PT. With me today is Ian Ji, Chief Strategy Officer, Lintus China, Jessica Kindle, Head of Digital Strategy, Zenith Optimedia, and Rob Campbell, Regional Head of Strategy at Wieden+Kennedy. Welcome, everyone. Well, media agencies are obviously suffering from this change of regulations. So my question would be, what is the actual how much is the actual impact from the perspective of creative agencies?
I think it might be a better question is to say, what's the impact to a client more than to a creative agency? And a lot of that is very dependent on who the individual clients are and what their expectations are and how they use certain media. Yeah. I think television is still a very dominant force here for a bunch of factors. But I also think that some brands use it in quite a lazy way. So I actually think it's quite a positive move for them and for creative agencies, as long as they utilize it in the right way.
So what is the right way?
I think it's meaning, not wallpaper. And I think what it's going to force people to do is think about how to use other things in different ways that are actually going to actually make people feel something, do something, and think something, as opposed to just constantly putting messages out. So
you're viewing the changes of regulation as an opportunity, actually, for both creative agency and clients. Yeah. What do you think, Ian?
I couldn't agree with Rob more. It's about an opportunity for clients to rethink their attitudes towards these various media options. And given the difficulties that they're going to have with limited television inventory, they're going to have to find ways in which the money that would otherwise be pushed there might be put to better use elsewhere. And I think a lot of clients are looking at investing more in new media, in digital media, and this is just another spur to actually getting on with that rather than sitting back thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right on the same page. I think that as we see clients starting to struggle with inventory challenges in TV, quality programming in TV, they're moving that investment, those dollars off of TV and onto other channels. So if it's as simple a step for the clients who aren't as advanced as moving their TVC into online TV, they're doing that and they're starting to understand the metrics of online video, for instance.
It's interesting, Ian, that you mentioned moving this to digital media. Can you elaborate that a little bit?
Well, it's the opportunity in very simple terms to use the other screen opportunities that exist, even for video. I mean, it's not as if broadcast TV is the only way that people consume video content these days, and so it's an opportunity to look at those perhaps more cost-effective alternatives. And people are already consuming a lot of video online. They're looking. I mean, there's a number of studies that seem to suggest they're spending probably as much time watching video online as they are watching on TV. So, you know, you really look at the pressure on TV pushing people now into really capitalizing on these new opportunities.
What about you? Like working for Wieden+Kennedy, what does it mean for you to move certain contents to digital media?
In some respects, we're a bit lucky because we've never been that traditional in terms of using television, especially as a medium. And our clients are very much more youth orientated, so digital's always been part of that area. I think the thing that's going to be really interesting is how, to Ian's point, people move over, because I do believe that a lot of people think the word digital means it's instantly successful, and they mistake social with meaningful, and they mistake quantifiable with effectiveness. And I think if you get that, if you get it right, it's going to work. For us, to be honest, it's not really that much of a change, which is, and it sounds quite like arrogant to say that, but it is part of who we've got and we can prove it, sort of thing. But I think it's going to be really interesting, and we are certainly having more clients that you wouldn't necessarily expect going, oh, talk to us about your views on digital, which is wonderful and brilliant. But we also understand that, you know, just because it's digital doesn't mean that you can just put it out and it's all going to work. There's too much buzzwords out there.
I totally agree with what you said, actually. Going digital doesn't really mean throw the contents online and then let people deal with it. It actually means we need to seek for a more effective way to actually reaching the target groups that you want to reach. But everybody seems to be talking about digital media nowadays. And what about the rates for digital media? I mean, will that be inflated, and are you guys worried about it?
Absolutely. I mean, not to steal the thunder.
Yeah, no panic. Costs.
I've got it. So we are seeing massive inflation. If it's not twice of what we were spending last year, it's close to that, especially in video. So where the clients who are previously spending on TV and now can't get enough or can't get the right programs, they're putting that money into video. The vendors know that. So our rates are going way up. We do have a lot of clients who, contrary to the myth of efficiency online, do not see efficiency from spending on online TV versus their TV. So depending on what your TV rates are, you may not have a cheaper online CPM. But we also see that inventory is declining in those vendors because more people are putting money on there, so that's also another reason the rates are going up.
That's very interesting. You mentioned actually the rates for online is not necessarily cheaper for television right now.
Absolutely. If you compare an online CPRP for online TV to a TV CPRP, certain clients will not see efficiencies in certain markets. So a market where it's harder for you to build reach against a certain target audience is still going to be harder if the online situation is similar.
So are clients still willing to spend that much going to this digital media, not knowing what's going to come out of it?
It depends on the client. And actually I wanted to mention earlier that that's one of our responsibilities. As clients and traditional clients who think about GRPs start to move their money from TV to online, as agencies and as marketers, we need to start to teach them TV pre-roll is not exactly the best use of digital media. And looking at GRPs and looking at reach online is not exactly always the best use of your metrics online. We need to start looking at engagement metrics and what our consumers are doing with that experience.
Ian, I know in your career you deal with auto companies quite a bit, for example, Audi. And in your experience, do you see that actually these auto companies are trying to increase or decreasing their ad budgets?
Yes, our clients are looking to increase their spend this year by a reasonable amount, and they're feeling very confident about the market. They are heavy users of traditional media because car marketing is driven a lot by the new model program, and you really want to be able to maximize the publicity value of a new car. And a big launch program for a new model is the traditional way of doing that.
Well, 2012 just started, so I would like to get your opinion on what are the biggest ad trends in the coming year.
I love saying trends because you have to wait a year to tell me I'm wrong. I think with some of the actions that are being made, digital's role and the way companies use digital will start being far more meaningful and done in ways that are very different to the way that a lot of companies do it. But what I also think is, this might be a contentious point, there's a lot of social media that's used to voice opinions that some people might not want to necessarily hear. And if any actions are taken on that, I think the role of digital will also change somewhat, and so it'll become much more of a storytelling medium than it currently is. And I think that can only be a good thing. I think we all appreciate that content is very important and people like to know about people. There's a lot of very tactical stuff that's not necessarily always done for the right reasons. I just think we're going to see in China, digital marketing really coming into its own a bit more and not going for the lowest common denominator that I feel a lot of brands have adopted simply because they go, we should be on digital.
We're seeing some clients increase spending in online video for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. We certainly have clients who will need to be retaught that an iGRP and online GRP is not exactly what you need to be doing for your consumers for every reason. And we'll need to get those clients to move forward in understanding what engagements are. But the fact of the matter is they're increasing spending, some of them 400% year over year, which is massive.
Jessica, Ian, and Rob, thank you very much for being on Thoughtful China today. Well, that wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you next time.